All right, let's jump right in. When I say the word test, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably stress, right? Or maybe some late-night cramming? Well, it turns out the world of educational testing is so much more fascinating than just a letter grade on a piece of paper. We're going to pull back the curtain and see what's really going on behind every single quiz and exam you've ever taken.
I mean, really think about that for a second. They kind of seem similar, don't they? They're questions, you give answers. But we all know they feel completely different. A pop quiz is a quick, low-stakes check-in. A final exam, well, that feels like the final verdict. This one simple question really gets to the core of what we're talking about today. Not all tests are created equal. Not by a long shot.
So to really wrap our heads around this, we have to start with the absolute basics. We throw around the words test and assessment like they're the same thing, but in the world of education, they are fundamentally different. Let's dig into what that real difference is. Here's the best way to picture it. A test? That's like a single photograph. It's a snapshot that captures what you knew at one very specific moment. But an assessment? Oh, that's the whole photo album. It's the entire story of your learning journey told through homework, class participation, projects, the whole shebang.
Okay, so if assessment is this big, ongoing thing, what's it actually trying to do? Well, it basically has two major roles, and a great way to think about them is as the coach and the judge. One is on the sidelines with you, helping you improve, while the other is there at the end to announce the final score.
And these two jobs, they can be done in pretty different ways. You've got your informal assessments. That's the coach giving you a quick tip in the middle of practice. It's spontaneous, unplanned. Then you have formal assessments. That's more like the judge's official review. It's planned, it's systematic, like a midterm. You really need both to get the full picture. And here is where that coach versus judge idea really clicks. Formative assessment is the coach. It happens during the learning process. Its whole point is to give you feedback so you can get better. Think about getting notes on a rough draft. Summative assessment, on the other hand, is the judge. It happens after the learning is all done to see what you achieved. One is for getting better, the other is for the final grade.
Now let's say you've taken a test and you get a score back. What does that number actually mean? This question is huge, and it leads to two totally different ways of thinking. Are you being measured against everyone else in the room, or are you being measured against a fixed, unchanging standard? This is the classic battle, the curve versus the standard.
So let's break this down. Norm reference tests are all about competition. They're designed to rank you, to show how you stack up against other people. This is where you get things like percentiles. But criterion reference tests, they couldn't care less about the person sitting next to you. They only care about one thing. Did you meet the standard? It's all about what you can do, period.
And some real-world examples make this crystal clear. Getting a TOEFL score percentile, that's norm referenced. It's only meaningful because it tells you how you did compared to a huge group of other test takers. But your driver's license test, that's a perfect criterion reference test. The examiner doesn't care if you're the best or worst driver they've seen all day. They only care if you meet the minimum standard to be safe on the road. You might be thinking that testing has always been this way, but no way. Our ideas about what to test and how to test it have changed so much over time. It's actually a pretty fascinating story, a real evolution from just testing abstract rules to testing how people perform in real life.
Let's do a quick trip through history. We started way back with a focus on just written translation, purely academic. Then, in the 1950s, we got really into these discrete point tests, which meant testing one tiny, isolated piece of grammar at a time. By the 70s, things started to shift. People began to favor an integrative approach, looking at multiple skills at once. And that led us to where we are today with the communicative approach, which asks the most important question: can you actually use your knowledge to get something done? So what's the practical difference? Well, a discrete point test is that classic multiple-choice grammar quiz. Super easy to grade, but it doesn't really tell you if someone can hold a conversation. Integrative testing, though, is much more true to life. It asks you to do something like write a summary of an article. And to do that, you have to read, understand, analyze, and write, using a whole bunch of skills together, just like you would in the real world. All right, that brings us to today. With all these different ideas and approaches floating around, how do we decide if a test is actually any good? It's not as simple as whether the questions are hard or easy. There's an entire toolkit of principles that experts use to figure out if a test is well designed. So a truly good test has to tick a few very important boxes. It needs validity. Like, a math test should actually test math skills, not just complex reading comprehension. It needs to be authentic, meaning the tasks on the test should look like something you'd actually do in real life. And every one of these principles, from making sure results are consistent to ensuring the test is fair, is absolutely crucial for making sure a test actually helps learning instead of hurting it.
And embracing this modern toolkit has opened the door to a world beyond those old-school bubble sheets. We still have traditional assessments, sure, the ones focused on memorizing and recalling facts, but now they're joined by what we call alternative assessments. We're talking about things like creating portfolios, working on group projects, even delivering presentations, methods that focus way more on the learning process and on real-world skills.
You know, a huge reason for this shift is something called the theory of multiple intelligences. It was championed by a psychologist named Howard Gardner, and it completely changed the game. He argued that smart isn't just one thing you can measure with a single score. Instead, we all have a whole range of different intelligences, from being good with words or numbers to being skilled with our bodies or with other people.
And that leaves us with a really powerful question to end on. If we believe that people are smart in many different ways, then shouldn't we have many different ways for them to show us what they know and can do? It makes you question the whole idea of a one-size-fits-all test, and it really opens your mind to what the future of learning could look like.